Bantu education enforced a system of inequality throughout South Africa, even after its official end in 1979, and its actual death in 1996 with the creation of a new education curriculum. The inequalities it created are still felt today in both the quality of education and quality of life for many South Africans. When apartheid ended in 1994, negotiations resulted in a sunset clause guaranteeing bureaucrats of the old South African government a place for the next 5 years. These entrenched employees were the ones in the transitional government of national unity who understood the process of policy-making, yet were unlikely to ease the path of change. New ANC government workers, on the other hand, had lots of ideas of how to improve the system, but little practical experience in implementation of their ideas. While integration of schools seems simple enough, the challenge of creating an entirely new curriculum, as well as addressing the shortage of qualified teachers and resources on the ground, was daunting. The 1996 South African Schools Act was unfortunately more politically symbolic than practical. The difficulties in combining 17 different education departments, from the Bantustans and others, meant accountability and proper guidance on how to implement new policies were nowhere to be found. Even now, the effects of that inefficiency can be seen, as the Department of Basic Education fails to provide that basic education to most pupils. 10 years after the South African Schools Act, 48.3% of sixth graders could not read, and 84.7% of sixth graders had only a beginning mathematics level or lower. In fact, the level of learning in mathematics continues to be so low that in 2016, the government changed the pass rate for math to 20%, requiring students to only understand 1/5 of the work in order to reach the next grade. While the high school graduation rate has improved somewhat from the 1996 rate of 23%, the 2014 rate of 38.5% is still very low. Rather than improve public schools, educational quality in South Africa appears to be hardly better than it began. Even worse, opportunities for poor or rural South Africans continue to be unequal. Integration of schools has been a fraught process. Although popular opinion in support of integration has steadily increased, in practice schools are still largely divided along racial lines. Township schools struggling to teach basic educational skills like reading or mathematics found it difficult to install the unclearly defined curriculum meant to help them. Meanwhile, formerly whites-only schools have retained the vestiges of apartheid privilege, with better staff and facilities. As a result, whites and middle or upper-class blacks increasingly send their children to private school. Of the 12.5 million South African students, 5 million of them attend private school. An average 20% of the government's budget goes to education every year, with schools in poorer areas of the country receiving more state funding. However, this money is utilized poorly. Meanwhile, schools in richer areas charge extra fees that improve the quality of education, but also exclude the lower class. South African educational quality no longer depends on race, but on class. Those who can afford to send their children to expensive private schools or pay the fees required by a good public school in the city do so, while everyone else must deal with the abysmal public school system. The problem is cyclic. It is difficult to escape poverty if the only way out is an expensive education.
Created using Bantu.